Hola a todos, soy Pamela de Asian Boss. Con respecto a lo sucedido en el Capitolio, nos dimos cuenta de que muchos estadounidenses creen que China se está riendo de Estados Unidos. ¿Pero es esto cierto? De hecho, quisimos preguntarle a los chinos al respecto, pero nos sorprendió bastante que ellos no estaban al tanto de la noticia. Y uno pensaría que esto aparecería en todos los medios chinos, pero no fue así. Por lo tanto, decidimos preguntarle a los estadounidenses viviendo en China sus opiniones al respecto y cómo es para ellos vivir en ese país. Pero antes, no olvides suscribirte a Asian Boss Español y activar las notificaciones. Ahora vamos a Shanghai.
What's your background and how long have you been living in China?
Hi, I'm from Tennessee originally. I've been in China for about 5.5 years. I was in New York City for 4 years before here.
So I'm from the US and I've been living in China for about 8 months. I go to NYU Shanghai.
I'm from Washington, D.C. I came here to China to study. I go to NYU Shanghai.
Well, I'm originally from California, and I've been living in China for more than 3 decades.
I've been living in, how long have I been? 7 years? 8 years? Since 2013, let's say that. Been living in China since 2013. Moved to Shanghai in 2014.
What brought you to China in the first place?
Well, I got on the wrong flight. No, I'm joking. I just needed a job like everybody else. Came over here to check it out for a year, and 7 or 8 years later, still here.
First time I went to China was in the 90s. My mom was doing business here, and she was like always telling me and my sister that China was like the future and that we should learn Chinese. And I think it like stuck in the back of my head. I spent like a summer here in the 90s with her, and then I came back in college. I wanted to study Chinese, and I got a scholarship to study in Beijing. And like a year wasn't enough, and like I really wanted to come back, and so after I graduated, I came to Shanghai.
There was just some I don't know, existential draw that like I just felt like Shanghai was like the place to be, right? And I think part of it also was a sense that like, what was I going to do in America, right? Like I just felt like what opportunity was I going to have with just like a bachelor's degree and nothing else, right? Like what job was I going to get, and how was that going to be like in any way fulfilling in America? I didn't see opportunity there. And maybe there was, and maybe I'm wrong, but I just didn't see it.
Did living in China meet your expectations?
It exceeded them because I want to say prior, I really didn't have any expectations of China. It was just like, this is China, it's a big country, they make stuff. But when I came here in Shanghai, I really was like taken back as far as the convenience, the difference in the lifestyle, how global it is.
I never thought it was going to be a life sentence. Like 30 years, 36 years, a very long time. So when I came, it was a 1 year, 2 years.
What would you say is one of the main things, or a few of the main things that have kept you here?
Well, I established a family, and my husband is from Shanghai, so we decided long ago that Shanghai would be our home. But also the opportunities, the business opportunities. I worked for large corporations at some point, and then as I raised our children, having a bilingual, bicultural life has kept us here, really.
I think it went beyond my expectations. Originally, I didn't really have much. I thought it was going to be similar to the States. But actually, it's a lot more advanced than I thought it would. And going back to the States after my first time kind of gave me like a reverse culture shock. For example, WeChat, Alipay, like you just scan the QR code and you do something. And then back in the States, we're still using credit cards.
I was living in San Francisco before I came here. And I love San Francisco, but it got to the point where I couldn't afford it anymore. Yeah. And a lot of people that I was friends with also had to leave San Francisco because they're like, to do what we want to do with our lives, like we can't do it and pay rent. And so I feel like that's something I feel like I've seen in America a lot since I've lived, like for the past 12 years of living here, like more and more this like kind of divide of like I could go back, but I would just be like doing a job maybe I don't love for, I don't know. I have
it's
more.
A grind.
Yeah, it's more
actually,
of a grind.
That's really the difference. The grind in New York is just brutal. You end up, there's the fantasy, there's like the idea of like, if I can make it here, I can make it anywhere, right? But actually so much of like the stuff that we do is all online. It's all digital, right? This idea of like, I have to basically not be able to pay rent and then like eat trash food every day and then like living like the starving artist life. Actually, no, it's probably healthier for you to just have a place where you can have a stable life, right? And like you don't have to worry about like how am I going to pay rent next month, right? And like that's the biggest thing when like coming here, being able to kind of find these like part-time jobs or full-time jobs that kind of jumpstart your career in some ways, and then realizing like a lot of the work that you make, it's all going to go online. So as long as you can survive, and you can actually be more creative.
What was your biggest challenge in living in China as an American?
I think at the beginning, just learning the language. And not just the translation of the language, but how it's applied, how it's used by people. Because there's a lot of misunderstandings can happen if you don't really understand what's behind their phraseology. And then getting used to their customs. I'm the visitor. I'm the one that has to change to fit in here, not the other way around. It takes time.
Before COVID, my biggest challenge was just finding products, I guess, for my hair, finding products that I can use, that cater to me. But now, post-COVID, I think my biggest challenge is just being a foreigner, because everyone's so scared of the virus. Even though I'm here and I've went through the quarantine process, people on the subway will back away. Even like earlier, a policeman just said to put on a mask, but he only told me, which I'm a foreigner, but he didn't tell the other people that were nearby that weren't wearing a mask. So things like that.
I think the biggest challenge was losing my sense of American exceptionalism. Here in Shanghai specifically, you are in constant contact with people from all over the world. And so you get exposed to new ideas such as, healthcare as a right, free college tuition, strong welfare states. And, it's really sad that, every once in a while you get asked by people, like, do you own a gun, just because they've heard of a recent school shooting in the States. And so I think that was my biggest challenge, was kind of understanding that there are a lot of things that, we in the States could have if we feel our potential that we just don't have right now. It's kind of heartbreaking, actually.
How are you able to keep up to date with what's happening in America if you live in China?
Yeah, so I read the news. There are a lot of sources of news. Some of them are censored here, so I have to use a VPN.
So regarding access to information outside of China regarding the affairs in the States, is it easy to do?
Yes. Yeah. I just have a VPN on my phone. I press like one click and then I'm on, and then I can see everything. Yeah.
Okay. Is it easy to do?
It's almost like too easy. Literally, I work with a bunch of Americans, and when Capitol Hill was happening, everyone's like, I just can't get off Twitter.
So what was your reaction to the recent U.S. Capitol riot?
Honestly, I was rather disturbed. It was quite shocking too, because I went to sleep the night before and then I wake up and my cousins in England are like, hey, have you been checking the news? And I was like, what news? They're in England, so there's a lot of things going on there too. And you wake up and you're just like, wow, like my capital, like in my country, has been attacked. So it was very disturbing and very shocking to me.
I was surprised, especially because I was in the States during the whole Black Lives Matter movement, and coming here, I thought things in America would be better, and what happened in the Capitol, it really surprised me, especially because how forceful they were during the Black Lives Matter protests. My mom got pepper sprayed, battered, shot at, and she was also like a veteran, and then people were able to storm the Capitol, go in the building, and nothing happened to them, not even close to the same level. It kind of hit me personally, and I was really upset about that too.
Just being over here, I can see it from a perspective of the outside looking in, and it made it seem like, how can you say, your house isn't as in order as you thought it was, but it was like a reality that people are upset no matter where country they're from, and that these type of things happen in poorer countries and the richest countries. So it was like a mixed feeling. Personally, it was all of the above. It was disappointment, embarrassment, being a little bit ashamed, but also just understanding that these people felt so overwhelmed that they couldn't, this is what the only outlet that they felt.
As an expat in China, how do you perceive the state of how things are going at home right now?
It's a mess. It could be a lot better, a lot further along if there was more unity, I guess you could say. If there was more people on the same page about what's real, what's fake news. But a mess in one word.
A lot of the people in my family are conservatives, and I can speak firsthand of when I was living in the U.S. It's easy to get sucked in to the cyclone of the media cycle, and to where you only hear kind of the U.S. perspective. But living abroad, being on the outside, it opens your mind, and you hear different perspectives or different angles about things that are happening, and it really broadens your horizon.
You just have this tinderbox of political anger, especially from the far right, that I think we saw it explode once already, and who knows what's going to happen in the near future, or even in the next 5 years. Where does that take us? I think a lot of the anger stems from people who grew up believing their life was going to be a certain way, and then it's not, right? And they don't have the opportunities their parents did. I think my generation is maybe one of I guess I'm a very old millennial, the oldest millennial. They're older than you think. But my generation is I think the first one that is going to do less well than their parents. In a while, right? In at least a few generations. So I think that's kind of at root of a lot of this anger, a lot of the frustration people feel is expecting life to be a certain way, and then being like, nope, you can't afford a house, you have to pay back all this college debt, you can't afford healthcare because that's gone up crazily, and all this stuff I think makes people feel just frustrated and angry, and they want a place to lash out, and maybe it comes in the ruse of far right politics or whatever else, but I think that problem has to be addressed.
When you hear some people at home say things like the Chinese must be laughing at the U.S., what kind of insight can you share as someone who's actually living in China?
It's true. No, not just the Chinese. I would say maybe everybody's laughing at the U.S., not just people in China, not just Chinese people, but foreigners in China. The UK was laughing, but they're not laughing anymore. I would say everybody, just because of the unnecessary negativity in the States right now.
There's many different ways to see the U.S. from the Chinese point of view, and of course there's one group that have always aspired to go to the U.S. to study and to absorb what they perceive as our great democratic tradition and how we live and treat each other. But there's also a group that I suppose would say, I told you so. There was always a mirage, and there's a part of China, of the United States, they don't understand. And that is an evolving conversation. I think one of the results of it is Chinese people have become more proud of themselves. They feel that, look around, look what we've done. And we don't have that system, but maybe our system for Chinese people is better for achieving the common good, developmental results and improving lives for the common good than the U.S. system. I've heard that conversation. I wouldn't say they're laughing at China, at the United States. I wouldn't say that, but they're definitely analyzing and comparing.
It's true. The world is laughing at the U.S. China must be laughing at the U.S. Everybody's laughing at the U.S. It's not just China. I think I don't know. Who's not? It's deserved. We deserve ridicule right now because we're acting ridiculously, and we've been acting ridiculously since Trump took office, and that was very much foreseeable. You could see that in the election. I felt that like in 2016, we just elected a clown, everybody's going to laugh at us. And then we've spent 4 years of having everybody laugh at us. I mean, this was the most predictable thing ever.
So my interactions with local Chinese have, especially with regards to the events that have taken place this year, have generally fallen into two categories. The first is confusion. Chinese who have for years looked up to and admired the U.S. are just baffled by the things that are happening. They cannot believe it. But on the other hand, and I wouldn't say this is another category because it generally follows this first part, is that they tend to be very sympathetic, actually very, very sincere in saying, like, I'm sorry this is happening. They have no malice towards the U.S. Average Chinese people are really sad for us. And they see that, you know, in some parts the U.S. has fallen, and they're not cheering that on at all.
I would say that when all of the news breaks about big events in the U.S., most of my Chinese friends are like, how are you doing with that news? Is there anything you want us to talk to us about? Is your family okay? I think when COVID got really bad in the U.S., a lot of my Chinese friends were like, oh, do you need us to send you anything? Like, are you guys staying safe? When the Capitol riots occurred, the same thing. They were like, how is your family? Like, is there anything we can do for you?
Can you see riots like the one at the Capitol Hill happening in China?
Never, ever, never, ever.
They have happened. I mean, there has been social unrest here. Do I think it's possible that it would happen now? It's possible, but unlikely. Because I think it would be there would be the strong hand of the government putting a stop to it pretty quickly.
I would say two big differences are that you can't own guns here.
Oh,
So people were heavily armed and had military style stuff, and that could not happen here, number one. And then number two, a lot of it was organized using social media that was totally unregulated, which is this thing that I think America's gonna have to figure out of yes, free speech, it's very cool, but you can't yell fire in a crowded building, and how does that apply to social media, and how do we stop hate groups from organizing? And in China, they're just no, we're just absolutely not, we're just cutting that off right now.
What have you heard from your Chinese friends about Trump? How favorably or unfavorably is he perceived in China?
A lot of people ask me why we elected Trump, and I mean, I always tell them I didn't personally elect him, but they genuinely ask me, why do Americans elect him? And they just find him funny, and they don't understand why he's president, and neither do I. So
sometimes I chit chat with taxi drivers about Trump, but I never really talked to any of my friends about Trump from 2016 until now. Not really.
What are some of the things you hear taxi drivers say?
He's gonna wreck your country. Get him out of there. Why did you put him there in the first place? Is his hair real? Where is he from? Do all Americans think like that? Stuff like that.
I think in China, Trump is a joke. The whole presidency is a joke, but realistically, Trump is the greatest thing that's ever happened to China. I mean, just the ability for China to make significant gains in international politics and through soft power because the U.S. is handling everything so poorly. I mean, from an environmental perspective, for Trump really scaling back a lot of these green initiatives, so China has the opportunity to say, hey, we'll be the leader in a greener world.
We tried to interview the Chinese in the streets before, but we're surprised to find that locals actually don't know much about the Capitol riot. We thought it'd be all over Chinese social media. Why do you think this is?
That's actually a good question. I mean, I think that, I think that Americans, as Americans, we kind of think that our politics are the most important, but I think that not every little thing that happens matters, or it's not as important to other countries as we as Americans might feel it is for us.
Yeah, there's a large disconnect with what's happening abroad and what's happening in any political sense to the reality of day-to-day life here on the ground. I'm not sure why that is, to be honest, but yeah, I also sense the same thing. There's a lack of thirst for current events, and it's people tend to be more concerned about improving their own lives rather than thinking about the big picture.
I didn't know that. I also thought it would be heavily published in Chinese media, just because I feel like any example of democracy not going well is exciting from a Chinese government perspective. But I suppose the idea of broadcasting riots is still not in the Chinese government interest.
How do you feel you get treated by Chinese society as an American?
Well, you know what? I've always said this. I think it's more foreigners as a whole than just Americans. When I was living, before I came to Shanghai, I was living in a small town, and it was more like all of you foreigners get out of here versus you Americans go, but you Canadians can stay. It's not really like that, at least in my experience. And there were some places that didn't really serve foreigners, I guess you could say, but it was more, I guess, because foreigners caused a ruckus in the past. And like I said, it wasn't like a white or black thing, a Canadian, British, American thing. It was just like all of you foreigners get out of here.
Back 13 years when I first arrived here, there was this rock star effect where you say you're from America and everyone's like, wow. You say you're from California, they go, wow again. Now there's been somewhat of a desensitization amongst Chinese here because there are, about 250,000 foreigners who live in the city. But still, regardless, I think that there is still somewhat of a cowboy or a grandeur effect to saying that you're an American. They still look up to us in some ways. I've had really no issues. I mean, even from the perspective of myself being LGBTQ, where in the States I might feel uncomfortable going one place or another, here I have no fear of being who I am here. There's not much judgment that takes place. It's a kind society.
As a black guy, black American, I am treated better than my African counterparts. I can say it's a noticeable difference. It's noticeable, right? I don't know what it is. I don't know, but it's noticeable based on my passport, places I can go, and etc. As a foreigner, I want to say yes, I am treated with a lot of passive aggressive, I won't say xenophobic discrimination. Like when people see me, they make sure to put their mask up. The most noticeable incident I had was maybe last week. I got on this elevator and I had my mask on. This girl, local, she was on the elevator with her friend, no mask on. She saw me and she turned around and put her head in the corner. And her friend in Chinese asked her, like, what are you doing? And she said to him in Chinese, and I could understand. She said, I don't want to get sick because of the foreigner. And I would say those things start to add up. So I want to say the treatment is not physical, so I never feel like I'm physically in danger, but there is the emotional and a mental passive attack on you because you are different. So I would say that's how I'm treated living here in China.
Having lived in both the US and China, which country would you prefer to be based in now?
At this very moment, because of the COVID, I am perfectly fine where I am. Honestly speaking.
Right now, I would say China, Shanghai specifically. Shanghai's safe. You got to wear masks on the train and outside. We just got yelled at by the police for not having masks on the street, but it's safe. People are at Starbucks. People go to the Nike store. You can hang out and do regular stuff. In the States, it's not really like that. But as far as forever, Shanghai and China can never be forever because you can't own property here. It's kind of hard to get a driver's license. It's kind of hard to do forever life things here unless you, I don't know, get married or something like that.
This is a question that I actually think about a lot because I have a 3-year-old son, and where is he going to grow up weighs on me. And of course I want him to grow up in America. I really want him to have some time in America at least, right? Even if he grows up partly in China, partly in America, I want him to have some of that cultural experience. But I cannot see moving to the US right now. I hope things get better. and that like there are more opportunities there. I hope that like the healthcare system gets fixed, and so it's not so ridiculous, because these are like practical concerns that I have in going back. If I were to go back with like my family, like, okay, well, what are we going to do for healthcare? What am I going to, like I would probably have to go there with my own business, and so I'm like that gives a whole host of things that I would worry about that I don't worry about here. And so yeah, like it's a no-brainer that I would rather live in China right now, with or without COVID. But I really want the U.S. to like step up and do better and make it so that I can go back there with my kid, and that he can experience life in the U.S. like I did growing up. I hope that can happen. I hope, by the time he's in middle school is my fingers crossed hope. Give it 10 years, but I'm not that optimistic.
And what message would you send to your family and friends back home?
Everything is so politically fraught that I don't feel like any, I don't know any message that would, like, I feel like it would be two entirely different messages for like two entirely different groups of people who are Republicans or Democrats, because you can't like talk the same way to those people.
I want to say stay safe. Don't do anything silly, like stay strong. I know things right now in America aren't the best as what they can be, but it will get better.
Yeah, come together right now. There's a lot of back and forth, a lot of unnecessary infighting between races, cultures, what's true, what's fake, all of that stuff. Just get on the same page and get past the virus, and then deal with all that other stuff later,
¿Qué te parecieron las opiniones de los estadounidenses? Gracias por ver este video y, como siempre, mantente curioso.